Welcome to my little corner of the internet and actually a little corner of our finished basement in our family room that is designed for us to have quiet, even exercise. There's some puzzles, there's some toys for when kids come over, and there's even my husband's grandmother's piano, antique piano from the 1800s or early 1900s. And so this is one of my favorite places in the house. My husband has this quiet sit right in this chair every day. And so welcome to this, and I am going to be talking probably mostly from this place over the next few weeks. Recently, the last several days I've been getting tons and tons of questions. People have been asking me about this very question. What are you doing about fill in the blank? What are you doing about all your feelings during this time? What are you doing about your schedule? What are you doing about even your loneliness? What are you doing about food? Really practical, different things. And getting on the phone and answering their questions and doing my best. And I'm finding out from them, what are they doing about X, Y, and Z during this unprecedented time of history that we find ourselves in, something that we've never been in before. So we're going to explore one thing a day for as many days as we can about what I'm doing about certain things. And my goal for you is to bring you practical help and then a glimmers of hope as we walk through this time together, sitting in the boat, rowing side by side to see if we can come out the other side with new life and freedom and better than we were before this all came about. So, welcome, and I'm excited. So the first thing that we're going to tackle today is, and this is kind of a scary one, and the biggest one for me right now is, what am I doing about my anger? And that is something that sort of flew right to the forefront when this all blew up a couple weeks ago. I found myself getting very angry, and I'm not typically a super angry person, but I can get there very quickly if I feel threatened. And as this scenario has come closer and closer to me personally here in New Jersey, I've watched my anger just almost completely get out of control. Something that's designed for good and my servant for me to act had now become my master, and I was just not having it. It was beginning to eat me alive and cause a lot of problems right here in our home with the people that I live with. So I really found myself getting angry at some strange things. Well, in my anger, I tend to be a fighter. And as my threat level has risen, my first response was going into full tilt, and then that's what happens to me. And I was getting angry at all the rule breakers because I'm a rule follower at heart. Tell me what I'm supposed to do, I do it. And I was getting mad at all the rule breakers, the people who are not social distancing, the people who are still going out. And that was really where my anger was being directed, was at all of the rule breakers. Well, Alan's anger, when Alan feels threatened, my husband, he tends to go into denial and dismissiveness, where I go into overdrive and panic. So he was being like, this is no big deal, you're acting crazy, which I was. I will grant him that. And I went to control and strong rules. What are you doing about your hands? You can't touch this. Oh my gosh, use gloves and all this. And I was starting to dictate all this control in the house. Well, I wanted to explore this anger thing because I was not really liking the way that I was feeling. And so I knew it had crossed the line from something good for me to something that was eating me alive. So I'm going to just give you a little bit of an idea about what's helping me that I hope helps you. And I'm going to talk about something really cool. We have been in counseling Alan and I have been in counseling on and off for the last like 15 years, some by ourselves, some with each other. And we have gone to a particular counselor who is awesome, who is a neuropsychologist, and he has a little like plastic brain in his office. And when we've come in a fight, and mostly Alan and I've gone to him for our marriage, if we've come in and we've been in a fight or we're really anxious or something, he gets out this little plastic brain that he has, and a lot of times he has explained to us that there's something that we have called an amygdala. It's God-given. It's there for a specific reason of when we feel threatened. And everyone's amygdala, when it gets like on fire because it's the place of threat, has different responses. And most of you have probably heard about the fight and flight responses to threat. We either fight, act out, or we flee, we run away. And so mostly I'm the fighter and Alan is the fleer. And so that causes obviously a little bit of conflict in our relationship. But there are actually two other responses to threat, and they are faint and freeze. And I think about the fainting, when people's knees buckle, like if something were to happen and then like a monster comes and their knees, they just fall to the floor. And it happened one time, and I'll tell you a little story about my daughter. When she was newly married, had gone to bed, and she assumed her husband had gone to bed. And she came downstairs in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom because they only have one bathroom. Well, when she was on her way downstairs, her husband was actually not in bed next to her, which she didn't know. He had been playing video games or watching TV in the basement, and he was coming upstairs at the same time as she was going downstairs. And the door opened to the basement when she was walking towards it. Well, of course, she thought there was like a home invader or a robber. And you know what? Instead of running, she actually fell to the ground. Her knees buckled. She didn't quite faint, but her natural response with her amygdala and the threat feeling, she fell. She fell down. And so that really showed me that is a normal response, and that's really what I'm talking about here. So when you think about that from an emotional standpoint, and we'll get to that in a minute, what's happening to some of the people around us that they are fainting. And then the last thing is freezing. It's like, picture the whole idea of the deer in the headlights. They just completely paralyzed. You come upon them, the lights shine, they're standing in the middle of the road, and they are paralyzed. They don't move. They just are stuck, and they can't go anywhere. And of course, so that helps me. And that is also what's happening to the people around us right now as this threat level has risen. And I am amazed at this. So what's been really helpful to me is, at first I'm basically angry at all these people with all their different responses, and even angry at myself for my response to this. And so anger is just the driving force to my actions, and I'm freaking out. And then I realized every single person right now in the whole world has to feel some sort of threat at varying degrees. But there is actually a pretty mean monster who is out to get us. We have this enemy, this virus that is coming, coming for us, and so our threat, and as it gets closer and closer, like here in New Jersey, our threat level is high. We live only 40 to 50 miles outside of the center of New York City, where things are completely out of control, and we're actually watching our numbers supersede that of Washington and California. And so it's getting very, very, very close and closer and closer to me feeling personally threatened by this. So of course, my amygdala, my little brain part in the back, the counselor says it's like right back here, is getting more and more on alert. And so my natural God-given responses are getting greater. And so as I began to realize that this is happening around me with every single person. And of course, the person I live with, the person at the grocery store, the person delivering my stuff, the person at the pharmacy counter, the people on their walks and that are biking that I'm seeing on when we go for our hikes. Well, instead of anger, once I understood what was going on with myself and others, I was able to switch that to a place of compassion. First starting with me and saying, wow, Esther, I get it. I see why you're so angry right now. That's just your way of regulating yourself and dealing with this big threat. I see why you're lashing out. I see why you're trying to control everyone and everything. And I see why you want to follow the rules to the letter of the law and become angry with those who are not, because your amygdala is on fire. And you can't fight. You're not a scientist. You can't fight back in any other way. But you can fight back in your own home. And this is the way that you're doing it. And then I really thought about being tender with myself and showing myself compassion. Once I understood what was happening inside me and give myself grace and tenderness and compassion, I was able to flip it around and into what's going on with other people. And so for those of us who are responding, I'm responding by fighting. For those of us who are responding by fleeing, like my husband who's being dismissive, instead of freaking out on him, I'm able to have compassion on him. For the people lashing out on social media, who are like me, that are fighting, or the person who's angry at the grocery store and just freaking out at the cashier who's just doing her job, or healthcare workers, or politics, or whatever, that lashing out like I was doing, I can feel compassion for them. For the rule breakers, and maybe that's their way of handling it, or even the people who are rushing to joy right now and being dismissive, maybe that's their natural response, and that maybe they're fleeing, and I can have compassion on them instead of being mad at them. And then for the people who are just fainting, they're just sleeping a lot, can't handle it, isolating themselves, telling me they don't want me to call them or check in on them. And that is how they're trying to regulate themselves. And I can have compassion on them instead of being like, well, she's not being a very good friend during this time. And so, you know what? I'm just cutting her off. And I can have compassion on them. And then instead of me being angry at those who are paralyzed or judging them for their lack of response, I can have compassion on them. I think about those of people who are watching Netflix, just binging out on Netflix. They're not planting a garden. They're not organizing their closet. They are binging out on Netflix, maybe, or playing video games, or just feel completely paralyzed, or reading a book, or reading nonstop, or whatever. And they're not being active or making the most of this time. Instead of judging them, I can have compassion and tenderness toward them, because all of us are in the same boat, trying to regulate ourselves against this big threat and against our amygdala being on fire and our natural responses to this big, horrible thing that is happening in our society and in our world. So, fleers, fighters, fainters, and freezers, I see you. And I want you to know that I am trying my best to regulate my own emotion of anger in this and my own way of fighting back to one where I want to become very compassionate and others. And I hope this helps you as you're dealing with the people that you're living with, because that's who you're going to be spending a ton of time with over the next several weeks. And then the people you're interacting with on social media, and also the people that, even the government. And I'll tell you another little story. Our governor in New Jersey has just come off of a cancer diagnosis and surgery. And he's like 2 or 3 weeks out. And on Saturday, he had to make one of the probably the hardest decision of his entire career. He did not sign up for this. He did not know this was happening when he became the governor of New Jersey, when he shut our state down and pretty much put a lot of people out of work. And I thought to myself, this man is immunocompromised, and he is already really on high alert from his own threat to his own life with having this cancer diagnosis. And guess what? He is now trying to not only keep himself safe, but everyone in his state. And so I can't imagine what his amygdala is doing right now. And he is acting out of that place as well. And so instead of me being like, oh my gosh, I can't believe that he shut this down and won't let this or do that, I only had real compassion on the man. And this thought, thank you, God, for him. And thank you that he's doing his best, just like all of us are, to navigate this new normal and this thing that has come upon us. And so I felt a lot of freedom there. And instead of being eaten alive from the inside out, I felt great hope for my own self in this process, and then a great freedom in my own heart. And I hope that helps you today, and that gives you hope for the ways that you're navigating this yourself, and with the people that you love and the people that you're going to come in contact with. And so that is what I'm just going to tell you today about becoming angry. And I will say this to you. I believe that this demonstrates the very heart of God toward you and me. When he looks down at all of us and he knows that we just feel super threatened right now. He is like a shepherd, and he is a shepherd toward us, and he just has tenderness and compassion towards each one of us, even though we're acting in all kinds of weird and ugly ways. He doesn't see our sin, he sees our suffering, and he feels tender-hearted compassion towards us. And I want to be like that. I want to be like this for you and for me and for the people that I love. So thank you for listening. Thank you for being gracious and coming and listening to this today. We are going to get through this together, and Jesus is with us in the middle of the mess. That I am 100% sure of. So there you go. Have a wonderful day, and we will, and thank you again for joining me.